Welcome to another Thursday with ThirdPath webinar. We are so excited you are here. We know it's going to be another amazing webinar. We have a topic that I think so many people need to talk more about today. And luckily, we have Matt Becker to help us walk through this conversation, and two amazing shared care parents that I've known for so long who've really put all these ideas that Matt's going to be talking about today into practice. We're talking today about how do you balance work, family, and money. And the idea is that, yes, there are some smarter ways to do this, and you can take steps today to put some of those smarter ideas into action. The way we're going to do today's webinar is first have Matt talk a little bit about his organization and what he's been learning from Mom, Dad, Money. He's also a dad I met at Dad 2.0. It's a wonderful event that happens every year where 300 fathers get in a room together and they can share their thoughts about this kind of changing evolution of what it means to be a father today. And you'll see also that Matt's someone who's put these ideas into his practice in his life because he's really a hands-on dad as well. So I'm going to let Matt walk us through some concepts today about how we can be thinking about how to make work, family, and money work. And then I'm going to have a couple of parents, Elaine Cheney and Lisa Levy, talk about how they put these ideas into action. Welcome, Matt. I'm so glad you're here. Please tell us a little bit about this concept of how parents can be thinking about money over the course of their balancing work and family lives.
Sure. So first of all, just thanks for having me, Jessica. Very excited to be here, and I appreciate all the kind words, and I was very excited to meet you last year as well, and very happy to participate here and listen to some of the other speakers as well. I'm interested to hear what they have to say. So just to give some quick background, I mean, Jessica mentioned this, but I run the website Mom and Dad Money, and I'm a certified financial planner. So this is kind of what I think about, things from a financial perspective, and I specialize really in working with new parents and helping them find kind of this balance between, like you mentioned, between work, between life, and kind of using their money to facilitate all of that. And on top of that, as you can see from this picture here, I have two young boys, and my wife and I are both self-employed, so we struggle to balance a lot of this ourselves, all of the same things. So it's a very personal issue for me, as well as something that I deal with professionally every day. So, so here what we want to talk about quickly is just some of the basics of kind of putting a financial plan into place, what it looks like to get organized, to kind of get your financial life in order, and I like to compare it to building a house. I mean, there's a common phrase of kind of getting your financial house in order. And that's used in kind of a vague way, but it actually works as a pretty good analogy to a financial plan when you think about what goes into building a house. And not just what are the specific steps, but how do they all kind of fit together. So the first kind of way to think about this is when you start building a house, you don't just start building. You don't start right into it. What you do is you create a blueprint that kind of is based off what you want the house to do for you. What's important to you, what kind of functions do you want, how do you want it to feel, how do you want it to look, all of those things. And you create this blueprint that's then used to actually do all of the construction. And similarly, when it comes to planning money, to organizing your money, it's a lot of people start asking, should I be saving money? Should I be paying off debt? Should I be investing or saving for retirement or whatever? And those are great questions, but really the place to start is by looking at your personal goals, your personal values. What kind of family life do you want to build? What kinds of things would you like to do with your time? What's important to you? What kind of opportunities would you like to have? Would your spouse or partner like to have? Would you like your children to have? And really getting into the personal lifestyle side of it, because those are the things that matter. And there really aren't right or wrong financial decisions kind of in a vacuum. It's really about making the decisions that help you create the kind of life that you want for you and your family and reflect the kind of values that you have.
So Matt, So Matt, I want to
Yep.
talk a little bit about that one slide, and then if you're ready, we'll go on to the next slide because I underscored the, how you want to spend your time and who. I love that question, who you want to spend your time with, because I really think that's a core issue here, that what we're trying to do at ThirdPath and what you were so smart about talking about when I met you was that, we live life the way we want to live life, hopefully, and part of that is spending time with the people we want. And I think what we're going to hear from you and from Elaine and from Lisa is that by making smart choices around money, we have more time for the who's that we care about in our lives. And so I was just so glad to see that point in your slides when we first met. Is there anything else you want to say about that? Nothing required, or should we go on to the next slide? And what we can do is
No,
kind of go back and forth after you've talked about a slide. I have a couple small things I'll say, and then we'll go on to the next slide. What do you
yeah,
think?
no, I think that's a great point, and I'm glad you pointed it out because this is something I struggle with a lot, actually. I think it's very easy to get kind of caught up, especially in just like urgent priorities and kind of to allow things to take your time. Specifically for me, I struggle with work stuff, and just kind of my mind naturally goes towards work and thinking about it and spending more time and feeling like it's a priority. And I think it is so important, like you just mentioned, to really step back and think about, well, how do I want to spend my time, like you said, and specifically who, and then working backwards from there to make decisions that make those things possible. And it's not easy to do, but it is very important. I'm glad you pointed that out.
That's great. Great. Should we go on to the next slide, or is there anything else you want to say about this one?
No, I think that's great.
Great, great. Awesome. So we're
Great.
building a
So
house. We're building a house. We get the blueprint, and now we're thinking about the foundation.
right. So, and I just want to apologize if anyone out there actually knows how to build a house. I'm sorry if anyone that's not me. But once you're ready to build, the first part of the actual construction process is laying the foundation, and that's kind of the base upon which everything else is built. And your financial foundation is really just the system for kind of managing the money that comes in and sending it where you want it to go. This could be a traditional budget. It doesn't have to be. But basically, it's just about coming up with some sort of system that allows you to be purposeful with your money and put it towards the things, when we were on that last side and we talked about, how do you want to spend your time? Who do you want to spend it with? Well, this is about actually putting something in place that allows you to send your money towards the things that are most important to you, that facilitates you being able to do those things that are important to you. And that's really the foundation, because it's hard to make progress towards any of the rest of it unless you are kind of aware of how much money is coming in, aware of where it's going, and just being as purposeful as you can with your decisions there.
And you know why I wanted to be able to have a quick comment on some of these things is, as I was preparing for today's webinar, I think that the important thing about money is to also be able to talk about where we're not doing it so well, because I've learned that a lot of us have a lot of shame around money. There's so many ways we could be doing it better, and we're so aware of how we could be doing it better. We're probably doing some good things, but we're very aware of what we haven't done very well. And I think when I looked at your slides, this was one of the ones that I felt like, wow, I'm not really good at this one. I think by chance our family has gotten good at this, and almost like by you'll see in the next slide what we've done well by kind of being careful about spending. Our foundation what didn't get us into trouble. But now that my kids are older and we're actually an empty nester, it's interesting. I want to go back to the foundation, and I want to get this better, because I feel like we kind of got it just by chance to be good enough. So anyways, as we go through your slides, this was the one I was like, wow, I'm not so good at this, but now that I have a little bit more time, I want to get better at it. So anyways, just wanted to share that thought.
Great. Yeah, it's a tough one, and it's difficult to do as a couple as well, because you're each going to kind of have your own preferences and also have your own style of managing money.
Yes.
And so it's not easy to do this, but I think it's important to be trying and to be communicating as best you can.
Yeah, in fact, you'll find that I think probably some classics are, our family probably falls into that classic one. We've gotten to be much more in the middle of these two things, but one is the spender, one is the saver. The saver's anxious to spend, the spender's, likes to spend. And so it's been interesting to see how Jeff and I have had to get smart about those things. I think together we've learned we just like each other a lot, so we figured out how to kind of bumble through those things. But I
Right.
just wanted to be real here. Like, we don't have it all figured out. So, and
Sure.
I bet you're working with families that don't have it all figured out too.
I am, and my wife and I do not have it all figured out, and we actually just had a session with a financial planner. A financial planner hired a financial planner.
That
I
sounds
think it's
smart.
important. Yeah, so no one has it all figured out. So the next part that we want to talk about here is, again, going back to the house analogy, you have your foundation, and what you do next is kind of build the structure, build the walls, build the roof, and those are the pieces that basically just kind of keep you protected from the outside world. They keep out rain and wind and snow and, heat and cold and all of that stuff. And financially, you can build up the same kinds of protections against unforeseen, uncontrollable events. So an emergency fund, which is just kind of cash sitting in a savings account available for whatever unexpected expenses come up. You can get insurance. So insurance is there for kind of worst case scenarios to make sure that your family will always have the financial resources it needs no matter what. And then getting wills and other basic estate planning in place, not just to kind of direct, or to determine who would get money, but really to determine, who would be there to take care of your kids. How would those decisions be made? And again, these are just kind of the basic protections that, no one's bulletproof, but you get these things in place, and you have better protection, better security against some of the unforeseen events that might take place.
Yeah, and let's get specific about this one. Again, I think you'll see one of the takeaways from today's call is how there's a real potential opportunity of couples working together around this. If you're a single parent, maybe it's finding someone who can really partner with you to think about this, a financial planner, or maybe it's even a sibling that helps you think about this, or a good friend, or whatever. But like working together, what I saw is that Jeff and I brought different expertise to this particular point. Like, he was really good at saying, you know what, we got to think about insurance, we got to think about our wills, and he kind of pushed me along to get that done. And I was the one who said, well, we need a cash reserve. We need to make sure that, when that unexpected thing happens, the washer breaks, the whatever, we own a house, we need a new roof. You need those things that aren't the everyday expenses. I was always worried of wanting to make sure we were ready to have cash available to handle that unexpected thing that came our way. And what I saw was that we worked together to kind of create this protection. I didn't even know this is what we were doing. I just kind of had a gut feeling. It's so good to see that smart word, emergency fund, because there's always going to be the unexpected that happens. And these other things are really good protection as well. So thanks for having this slide. It's a really good one as well. And I like the idea that you're building a roof and walls around your family.
Right, right. And one other thing that's great that you guys were kind of able to work jointly on this. I mean, one of the things I want to point out about this stuff too is that, traditionally these are viewed as protection against bad things, and that's also the way I just talked about it. But they also can provide opportunity for you to kind of take more risks in other ways, because if you have money in savings, if you know that you're protected against some of these worst case scenarios, you have a little bit more leeway to take maybe some career risk or something like that, or take some time off. And so these protections also provide opportunity. It's not just kind of there for the bad stuff.
Oh, in fact, I think we're going to hear some stories about that later in this call. That's wonderful. Thank you for pointing that out. That's terrific.
Sure. And then, so the last step here is, again, you got your house, you have the basic structure in place, but then you get to make it yours. You get to paint it, you get to plant your garden, throw up your basketball hoop, whatever it is that's important to you that makes it, turns it from a house into your home. And so, financially, it's not just all about kind of creating this, fortress around yourself. You'd also like to be able to enjoy yourself and give yourself opportunities for both you and your children. And so you get into things like, investing for the future, which gives you resources to kind of, again, make more decisions later on. Paying off debt, which kind of frees you up from obligations to anyone else. Maybe saving for college for your children so they have opportunities. This is all about just kind of using your money to give yourself more freedom to make whatever decisions make you and your family happy, as opposed to always feeling like you have to make decisions based on, paying your next month's bills or something like that. So that's where this last stage really comes in.
And this is the one that made me smile the most because, again, I don't think I didn't have the right words of what we were doing, but this is such a powerful perspective, and one of the many reasons why I have Matt on today's webinar and why I liked talking to him so much at Dad 2.0 last year, because your financial freedom, you will hear this in Elaine and Lisa's stories later too. I've really seen with shared care parents, yes, shared care parents are thinking about how to share the caregiving work, but they're also getting pretty smart about how to share the financial plan of their families. And what I learned from a lot of shared care families is that they're doing that with an eye on their financial freedom, meaning not feeling like they have to work all the time, but actually have some time for life. Now, I realize that this isn't available to everybody. We need to have good public policy so that people have more financial freedom and are not so stressed and not working 2 or 3 jobs, etc. I understand that we need good public policy to make sure that all families have access to this, but many families can make some choices here. And I just wanted to share a little bit about my story. You will hear Elaine and Lisa's story later. That really, Jeff and I did exactly what Matt's talking about. We made many choices about how to create some financial freedom. We bought a very affordable house. You'll hear about that as a theme from this call. And we actually were very purposeful in using public school, because what that meant for us is that we really had low expenses and we could pay off debt. And so we, as a family, without even really thinking about this, we were being very intentional to make sure that as a family system, we weren't going to feel like we had to go work all the time. We could keep our expenses down and have more freedom to do the work we wanted to do. And the last part of my story is what that meant is that, just like what Matt's saying, we could take a financial risk. I could start ThirdPath Institute 16 years ago, and I can guarantee ThirdPath Institute was not a moneymaker right to start with. In fact, there were a number of years where the money we brought in paid for the staff that we had. So this has not been a financial boon for our family, but we as a family could say, we can afford to do this. We can make it work. And so that concept of financial freedom, not just by getting the biggest job with the biggest paycheck, but by being smart about how you use your money, where you spend, is a really powerful point. So Matt, thank you for letting me share some of my perspective on this. What would you add before we go on to the next slide?
No, I think that's perfect. I think that's a great example of creating a financial plan, a financial foundation that gives you the freedom to do something that is unconventional and is kind of a financial hit, at least for a time being. But it was what you wanted to do, and I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's been really a gift for me, but hopefully a gift for the world too. So thanks. All right, back to your slides and your great perspective here.
Sure. So, taking all of what we just talked about and turning it into specifics. I don't know how in depth you want to go on this, Jessica, but basically, what I've done is create kind of a financial order of operations for you that, first of all, is not a golden rule and does not apply strictly to every single situation, but it's my attempt at helping people prioritize their financial responsibilities in a way that makes sense. And really the goal here is to kind of, one, make sure that you can provide for your family, 2, build a layer of financial security, because I always prioritize that first, is just making sure that no matter what, you've got your bases covered financially. And then 3, just kind of making decisions that are as efficient as possible. And so this is just kind of my stab at it, and would you like to kind of go through these items, Jessica, or how would you like to talk about it?
I think we'll, why don't you pick, so tell me about, let's just pick one, and then we'll go on to the next one, next slide, which I think is a great one to go into more detail around. So, for example, I get it, why you have the order you have. Some people, number 11, some people might feel like high interest debt is also really important to get rid of, but I think what I see in this list is, so long as you're making your minimums on your payments, you're not at least making it worse around high interest debt. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, and that actually is probably the biggest pushback I get when I have this. And so this is not to say that paying off high interest debt is not important. It's just to say that in my mind, so like you said, paying the minimums on all debts is number two. So making sure you're at least doing that. In my mind, it's important to get that foundation, that baseline underneath you. So getting some money into savings, having insurance in place that would protect your family in kind of those worst case scenarios. Getting just wills in place just to make sure that your children would be cared for by the right people, again, in those worst case scenarios. So that's why I have those things first, is because to me that is really the baseline security, is having those things in place. And then the other big one that's up there at number 9 is the 401k up to your employer match. And that's just a simple math equation. I mean, if you have high interest debt, let's say you even have 25% interest debt, which would be very, very high, an employer match in your 401k is probably a 50 to 100% return on investment. So it's just a better, just math, it's just a better return on investment, which is why that particular item is high.
Yeah, that's a great example. And in fact, we got one question from our audience, and then we'll answer this, and then we'll move on to the next slide. That was perfect, Matt. She asked about number 12. What do you mean? Tell us more about that 25% each.
Yeah. So basically, there are 4 things listed there. So building a bigger emergency fund. So I like to encourage people, I call stage 1 emergency fund maybe $1,000 to $2,000 in a savings account, which would allow you to handle kind of most types of unexpected expenses. Stage 2 emergency fund would probably be something like 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. Then the irregular expenses, which is basically saving ahead for things you know are going to come, but you don't know when. So things like car repairs or home repairs, things like that. Paying off low interest debt and investing beyond, that employer match. I say 25% of each. Again, that's not like a golden rule. You could mix and match, but it's basically that, to me, those are all relatively equal priorities. And once you've kind of accomplished those other things, numbers 1 through 11, it's tried to work towards each of those 4 things in some relatively balanced way.
Yeah, it's really great. It's a great list. Thank you so much, Matt. I really feel like you're giving good, excellent information for all of us to think about and plan around. So wonderful. I'm going to go to the next slide, and I want to make sure we get some time to have some conversations with Elaine and Lisa about how they put these great ideas into practice. Tell us about this slide.
Right. So this is basically an organized way to going back to creating your financial blueprint. What are you working towards? What's important to you? And this is just an 8-step process I have for trying to do this in a way that that makes it specific. It's something you can actually follow. So again, basically, it starts with just kind of 1 and 2 are really just about letting your mind wander and thinking about what is. If you imagine yourself, let's say, 3 to 5 years out. So this is not, long term. This is, relatively in a relatively short amount of time. And you imagine a happy life. I mean, what does that look like to you? Where are you? Again, who are you with? How do you spend your time? What kind of work are you doing? All of those things. Just try to imagine as much as you can what that would look like, and write down as many of those things as you can. This is just like a brain dump, basically. And then once you've done that, and once you've kind of started to create some kind of vision, put some of those things in some kind of priority order. So you could number them 1 through whatever. You could categorize them high, medium, low priority. But however you do it, try to pinpoint which of these things are most important to you that you'd like to start working towards, and which are less important. If you have a spouse or partner, ideally they can do those first 3 steps as well, and you guys can talk about this. And if this is your first time doing it, try not to focus on the things that you differ on. Instead, focus on the things that you share, maybe that you both put as high priorities. And those would be good places to start that you could start working towards together. Number 5, this is actually one of my favorite things, is thinking about some things that weren't on your list, that weren't priorities. So, for example, for me, I might go through this, and I probably would never envision having a fancy car. And it's not that fancy cars are bad. If that's your thing, that's great. It's just, for me, it's not important. And acknowledging that makes it easier to not put time or money or resources towards it, because I've written it down as a specific thing that isn't important to me. And then number 6 is, and I'm glad you listed this out, Jessica. So taking some of those things that you and your spouse or partner can agree on, and turning them into SMART goals. And Jessica wrote out the acronym here. SMART is, stands for specific, measurable, achievable, results focused, and time bound. So an example of this would be, like an example of a vague goal would be, like I want to buy a house, right? It's a nice thing to think, but it doesn't give you anything specific to work towards. Instead, you could say, I want to have $20,000 for a down payment on a house in a savings account within 3 years, right? And what you've done is you put a specific number, dollar number on it. You've put a specific timeline on it. You've put a specific place where you're going to put the money, and it allows you to be very specific about what you're working towards and what you can do to achieve that goal and track your progress along the way. And then finally, take action. You have to, we can plan all we want, but you actually have to do this stuff, and you have to start making progress. And then finally is just recognizing that your goals, your circumstances, all of that's going to change over time. So revisiting this process over time and updating goals, updating steps you're taking to achieve them, because your life is going to change and you're going to want to change your plan along with it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, this is a really good list. This is a wonderful list. Thank you. And I think what I did love number 5 too. I thought that was really great. In fact, I actually really like that you start with number 1. What a great way to begin. Get clear about what was going to make you happy. That's awesome. And then I like that you got both people to think about it separately and then talk about it together, because then each person can really get clear themselves what they want, and then look for those common denominators. But number 5, what an awesome thing, because what I can see in my life, honestly, when you're trying to figure out a life that includes work and family, you might be short on time and money. And so when I think about number 5 and how it's applied to my life, something Jeff and I luckily agreed on early on is not only did we not need a fancy car, we didn't need a fancy house. We wanted a house, but it didn't need to be a fancy house. It didn't need to look like something that you could entertain in. It's nice. It's very cozy. Don't get me wrong. I like our house. But this is not something that you're going to come and bring your, people to like have cocktail parties at. This is a house that's functional. But we did that in part because we didn't have money, but over time it was also because we didn't have time. And I think when I saw your number 5, I'm like, oh, that explains my house. We both agreed we wanted a house, but it needed to be just a functional house. If we wanted to go entertain people, we'd go somewhere else. I say that because I come from a family system where having a beautiful house is very important. And I think it was really fun to see, hey, I can now more clearly acknowledge that I made a decision about that. I like the decision. It's meant that Jeff and I have had a lot of time, and we've been able to save for the things that we really care about. So what a great list. You might have another thought before we hear from Elaine. And then
Yeah, very quickly, I just want to piggyback off what you just said, because I think it's so great. You said you come from a family where having a nice house is very important, but it wasn't important to you, and we all have that, whether it's family or society or community, whatever. We all have kind of expectations on us about things that should be important, and that's why I like that step as well, because it can be very helpful to actually reflect on that and say, you know what, this isn't important to me.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I think it's very easy to just kind of get trapped in others' expectations.
Yeah. And what people who are listening in today don't realize, if you have young kids at home, is that kids grow up. It's just hard to even imagine that. Like, I remember looking at parents of teenagers when my kids were yours age, Matt, and thinking, they're a foreign object. My kids are never going to be teenagers. Like, I couldn't even get my brain around that. Well, now I'm an empty nester. And so life goes on, and you do have these other chapters in your lives where you could spend more time doing something that you just don't have the time or maybe money to do early on. So it's also just kind of recognizing that there's going to be these life stages, and you don't have to do it all right at the start. You might have more time, maybe more money to do it later in your life, which brings us to a couple of great stories. This has already been so wonderful. Thank you, Matt. I'm going to introduce you to Elaine Cheney. Elaine Cheney is amazing. I have 2 other amazing speakers, Elaine and Lisa Levy. I've known Elaine forever. She's part of what's called ThirdPath's Integrated Life Advocate Community, an ILA. And I met her, near the very start of Third Path, and instantly could see that she understood deeply how important the mission of Third Path was, and that the reason she did that is because she knew that is because she lived it in her own life. So I'm so glad Elaine is here to talk a little bit about what's this journey that you've been on around work, life, and money? How have you made it work? What's been challenging? Did it change over the life cycle? And Elaine, as we go through this, I have these two slides that we can refer back to. So whichever one feels like they'll be helpful for you, we can kind of go back to those slides and look at them. Thanks, Elaine.
Okay. Great. Okay. Well, thanks for the opportunity to talk. And Matt, this has been really fun to listen to. I realized that my husband and I did many of the things that you talked about, but we stumbled our way through it. I don't know that we planned to do it that way, but somehow we've made it. Just to give folks a little bit of background, my husband and I are empty nesters now, and in fact, my husband just retired from his career as a long-distance truck driver last spring. So yes, you can get to this stage in life. Our son is grown and married and off on his own, and he is a millennial and kind of at the stage where he'll be starting a family himself soon. So it's been fun to kind of listen to Matt talk and think about our life and kind of think what really stands out. A couple things popped up for me. Like Jessica, the piece around what was not on our list really was very clear. Having new cars every few years or fancy cars were never important to us. We were really careful about the house we chose. Although I will say I've had my own business for about 20 years, and there was a point when I was trying to get that business started and we still had that big mortgage on our pretty modest house that I thought, gee, maybe we might have to, sell and get some other place. But we managed to get through that. But I do think a couple of things that really pop up for me, and whether Jim and I really talked about them explicitly, maybe not as much as we could have, but we were really clear on some of our long-term goals, and they stayed the same over the years. We really wanted to be comfortable and safe in retirement. And because I have my own business and so don't have any kind of paid retirement from a company, we really were careful about that. And we also wanted to be sure that our son was able to go to college and that he graduated as close to debt-free as we possibly could make it happen. So we kept those kind of big long-term goals in place. But I have to say that the short-term goals really changed at different stages in our lives. So when our son Stephen was young, short-term goals for little extra money was to have some fun, to go on vacations, not big fancy vacations, far away, but just to have some nice times down at the beach or up in the mountains, or saving up for a little boat that we could take out on the lakes and things like that were our short-term goals. And then as Stephen got older, different things popped up. So as he became a teenager, we discovered he was just really interested in and really quite talented with music. It's like, okay, now the short-term goals are more around music lessons and for percussion and trumpet and piano and being able to be part of the band and camps and that sort of thing. And so, and now our short-term goals are really around things we want to do around the house, or maybe more travel we want to do. So it's been interesting to see how the long-term goals stayed kind of the same, but the short-term goals change over time. There was one story that I've shared a number of times that kind of fun. It's sort of how we did college. And just to back up a little bit, I started my own business about 20 years ago, and quite frankly, I've had years that were pretty good, and then I've had years that weren't so good. And one of the things that was really tricky about it is that from year to year, my income, my husband's income stayed steady, but my income might go from 50% from the year to year. So there was a lot of fluctuation in how much money I was bringing in. So when we were thinking about college for our son, we had saved some, but certainly not enough to get him to pay all the way through. Our original plan was that during the years that Stephen was in college, I might go back into a regular job that I knew how much we were going to make for those 4 years, and I felt a little bit more comfortable with it. And interestingly, what happened was the year he was a senior in high school was one of my best years for my company. So we decided to just kind of see if we could pull it off without doing that, and went through the 4 years that Stephen was in college. My husband did, upped his miles a little bit on driving. I was able to take on bigger projects because, you know, we were empty nesters at that point, and we managed to get through college with very little debt. I mean, for someone his age, he graduated with, I think, somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000 worth of college debt, which is now paid off, and we were able to pull that off. So it was interesting to see how we were kind of flexed how we did things based on kind of where we were in life.
Wow. Can I underscore a couple things I hear you saying that are so wonderful? I hear a nice concept of thinking about what the long term is, and that you and Jim have had a kind of a clarity together about what your long term goals are and keeping on working towards them. And then this beautiful example of how your short term goals kind of changed at different life stages. And I think that's in itself is a really great takeaway. And then I think the other thing that you had in mind was, with some of these longer term goals, as someone who ran your own business, there wasn't a 401k, there was this shift in income from year to year, you had a plan B. Plan A, I'm going to continue doing my business to make it all work. Plan B, I'm going to have to go get a regular job to make it work. And then that's that fun thing that happens once in a while. Sometimes life does work better for us, and along came a really good year for you, and you could make it all work. But most importantly, you had a plan B of how to kind of keep on moving forward just in case. So those are some really great concepts, Elaine. I just wanted to underscore.
Yeah, and one of the things, too, that I was thinking, I love this financial freedom piece that Matt was talking about, and I don't think we ever put that name on it, but I think that was something that was always sort of a longer-term goal for us. And one of the things, just one more quick thing, if we have time for it, Jessica, I could share the thing on my wall in my home office. For several years when my business income was low or was fluctuating, I found myself, I'm sort of the money person in our family. There's usually one person who's the money person. I'm the money person in our family. So I'm the one that kind of takes on a little bit more of the angst around what's working and what isn't. And so I was really reflecting on, you know, what does it take to feel financially worry-free? And I captured some things. I put it up on a piece of flip chart on my wall, and darn if it's not still there. And some of them were just the kinds of things that Matt's been talking about. One, so what is it to be financially worry-free for us? It was to have 6 months reserves at all time in case my business went up or down or for those emergencies. To be adding something to savings, both long-term and short-term savings, even if it wasn't what we wanted it to be in a particular year. And this third one was kind of scary to look at now. Don't have to shuffle money to pay the mortgage. Must have been a little bit of time in there where it looked a little scary. I was like moving money from here to there to try to make the mortgage.
Yeah.
But then I also wrote, what's the attitude or approach or beliefs that I need in order to be financially worry-free? And the things that I had captured was calmness, just kind of stay calm. Knowing that we can live on less. We had done it before. When I was in graduate school, we lived really on less. That a passion or love of work will lead to success, and then to focus on learning and building relationships in my business, and the money will come. And I literally put this up on the wall, and I had to look at it a lot on some years. And it's a little faded now, but it's still up there, and it did help.
Oh, they're really great ones. Thank you so much for sharing those. That's a really excellent story. And I think, again, it's this idea that there's going to be different stages where it feels a little bit harder. And boy, can I relate, and many of us relate to that shuffling to make it all work stage. We've been there. So thank you, Elaine. That was awesome. Just what I was looking for, getting concrete about how we've put some of these ideas into practice. So Lisa, we want to hear from you too. You also are an amazing person out there. Somebody I met years ago, the very first shared care parent I met. You've written a great book about these ideas. You also run a consulting business yourself. What have you learned about work, family, and money? Tell us, Lisa.
Let's see. I'm trying to think of the sort of most important things or helpful things. I think that going back to Matt's slide discussion about values, to me, I was always someone who I would say had sort of eclectic set of interests. So, work is very important to me, but balance is also very important to me. And this was long before I was married or had children or whatever. So I knew that to be able to have that in some way was important. Also, I knew that it was really important to me that me and my husband truly shared equally in caring for our kids. And, we did that by both cutting back at work and both taking parental leave together and things. And so that value drove, okay, how can we connect the money to make these things possible? I think for me, I did feel deeply, for whatever reason, that like money was freedom, was choice, it was buffer, it was important in the freedom that it enabled more than the things it could buy. I guess that's, I always felt that pretty deeply. My first career was also in money management, where I was managing money for big companies. So both I learned a lot, but I also was able to take a lot of those fundamentals into my own situation, and so those have absolutely proven very helpful through times. But if I were going to share kind of a few things I think were most important for us, it was this idea of like living below your means or living at your means, but never above your means. And so for us, we the town we live in now, we first looked at it when we were buying our first house. It was more than, the budget we had for ourselves, so we didn't move here. And then interestingly, when we ended up moving to the town, like 15 years later, we looked at the real estate person was taking us to houses that were almost nearly twice as much as what we were going to buy. And we were like, no, that's for us. I think keeping your fixed expenses low means that you can, change things. So housing prices, car prices, those kind of things, if you can keep those very manageable, then you're in control of all the variable things, how often you go out to eat or how much you travel or whatever. So I think that sort of has been a really core thing for us. We also have always practiced this idea of, you save first and then you pay your bills versus the other way around, so that even if it's just a little bit, that your bill, what I knew as an investment professional is the more you can start building when you're younger, it just sits there and works for you when you're not doing anything. And so, we're really trying to tell our kids that, and just how much value it has if you can start young, even if it's only a little bit. So, I think we were very committed to that. I guess the last thing I would say is we also would save for big expenses, and there's a couple of things. One is it's fun to be spending the money when you know you have it versus like, okay, I'm incurring more debt and then I'm going to be really stressed about this. So, we're kind of long-term planning oriented. So, we knew that we wanted to both be at home when our children were, first born. So, we saved for about a year to 18 months ahead of time so that we could both take several months off. And, I got some disability pay, et cetera, through work, but, so that we weren't all stressed about that. And then the other big thing, we're also very focused on, and everybody's talked about this, which I think is such a really helpful idea, is, spending money about what you really care about feels really good. Spending money about all the crap you don't care about isn't that great, but yet that's really the American norm. Like, again, you need the big house and the big car and the big this, and I think it's just, and your kids need all the latest and greatest than you do. And there's just so much to buy. That's how our economy works, sadly, but it's true. And so, I think it's really figuring out if you like to collect things, if you like to travel, if, whatever it is that's most important to you, being able to use your money to have that in your life is really profound. And so for us, the two most important things have always been education and travel. And, we've done some amazing traveling through the years with the kids, and one of the really special trips we took was, I guess it was in 2010, so several years ago. We took 8 weeks to travel, and we both took a leave of absence and traveled with the kids for a good part of the summer. And it's kind of one of those experiences none of us will ever forget. It was a very special time, but it's something we had been saving for several years ahead of time. Again, somewhat, and we watched that grow through the years, and then it was like, yes, we're doing this. So we found sort of celebrating the whole process. You're saving for it, and then it happens, and then even after it happens, it's sort of that memory of the experience, or that's so much part of it. So my thought, having sort of worked in it as a profession for a period of time, and then just being a sort of regular family, is that the list of to-dos is finite. And I think that there's so much information, and in some ways there's so much, I don't know, effort to make people feel overwhelmed with it, that it feels, I think I've found a lot of people feel very sort of, hopeless about the whole thing. Or, I think we all have things we do well around it and not around it, whatever, but it's a sense of, oh, how could I possibly manage all that and remember all those things? And I think it's actually a fairly short, clear list, and I think if there are a few behaviors or practices that you put in place, I think so much of the rest of it takes care of itself. And anyway, I think it gets presented to people in general very differently than that.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of makes them feel completely overwhelmed with the whole thing, and I don't want to deal with this at all.
Yeah.
So
yeah. In fact,
anyway, that's kind of
what I hear in your
my
story,
sense.
what I hear in your story, Lisa, is like those systems are in some ways these behaviors of kind of making wise choices kind of easy to do in your everyday life as you and your partner move through life together, that those systems are just continue to kind of practice wise choices. And I hear so many wise choices that you made. I want to underscore some of them, and I want to talk about one in particular. But I heard from you thinking about this idea of your fixed expenses. If your bigger fixed expenses, if you keep those low, then you're going to have a little bit more wiggle room with your variable expenses. And then this whole idea of kind of being intentional about what are you saving for, and this amazing experience you've had as a family, really being intentional to save for those travel experiences, and how you've taught your son so much while you saved for those travel experiences, because they loved it too. So you've role modeled something for them that they can then do when they become parents themselves. Here's the one I wanted to talk a little about.
And
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I don't want to at all paint this picture that it's all perfect and there aren't things we get stressed out about,
Of
and
course.
that there aren't moments that you have that feeling of maybe even envy, well, this person has this
Yes.
kind of car, whatever it is.
Yep.
But I think it's really, I think comparing about most things makes most of us pretty unhappy. But I think those are the times. There are times my husband and I would have really catty conversations. Oh my gosh, did you see that? This is
Right.
the other thing. And,
Yeah.
Did we really mess up here? And blah, blah, blah. But, I don't think those are our deepest values, but it doesn't mean, I think all of us live in the sort of real world, and there's a lot of that stuff that's always kind of in our face. And again, I think that's so much our cultural norm about acquisition.
Yeah.
And, so it is to some degree a countercultural idea to say, for me, it's about enough. And if anything, I say I could go live on a mountaintop in one room, and I'd probably be really happy after managing a family for,
Yeah.
20 years.
Yeah. yeah.
Nobody's stuff, nobody's whatever. There's
Yeah.
something really beautiful about that.
Yeah, yeah. But I love what you're pointing out, which is that we can get a little confused. I certainly have myself when I visit that person who's made those other choices. So what I want to pay attention to is we have a millennial listening in all year long. We have millennials listening into our call to get them to think a little bit about these issues ahead of time. They have such wisdom around this. So I'm going to get Ariel to share her thoughts because I know that she might have to get off shortly. But Lisa, afterwards, I want to come back to you because there's something that you guys did that's very profound around money and gender when you do shared care. And you and Brian both worked a 4-day work week for a year. And so you have to make that financially affordable too.
For 10 years.
For 10 years. For 10
years,
yes,
yeah.
of course. Sorry, I even know that fact about you. So I want to talk about how you made that financially affordable and what that looked like to think about that together. So after we hear from Ariel, we're going to circle back to Lisa, and then we will wrap up the call in about 4 minutes, 5 minutes at the most, because I know that we're running a little bit late and some people might have to get off. So Ariel, you've been listening in. Thank you so much. What do you think about all this? What makes sense to you? What has it got you thinking that you want to try out to do maybe in your own life? Tell us, Ariel. And I have to make sure that I've unmuted you. Yes, you are. There you are.
No, yes, I really appreciate being involved. I think this honestly is, my anxiety is like high because I'm an AmeriCorps visitor right now and my service ends next week, and my initial plan was to go to the government, but obviously there's a hiring freeze, and so I'm freaking out about what we're going to do financially. My husband's in grad school and he's a graduate teaching assistant, and we're having a cruise wedding, and which is way cheaper than a regular wedding, but it's still a lot, and we're just really trying to figure out the best way to be financially cognizant in our current work environment, with me trying to figure out what I want to do along with my passion for operating a nonprofit. Our current, that I can't put down too many roots because in a year and a half, so I mean I have limited opportunities because I can't become a certain organization service site, me leaving within a year. They want me to stay around, but the financial planning aspect of it is just like, man, I wish I would have known this earlier, or I wish I would have had an opportunity to kind of have this experience. This is information that if you don't teach your kids, then they're not going to know unless they actively seek out the best way to be in a positive financial situation. And a lot of the information that I've seen is that you and your spouse are on the same page. And I'm like, honestly, this is a conversation that you need to have with your significant other before you even decide to, move forward. And I'm like, some of this information is like, I wish I would have had with my husband before we decided to get married. I'm not saying like I want to kick him to the curb now, but
we get you. We're Ariel. We've been there. Every single one of us on this call has been there, Ariel. we could talk offline about the moment that Jeff and I really questioned what the heck were we doing, because there was so much confusion around this issue. So, and I hear Elaine laughing too. We've all been there, Ariel. That's part of the truth,
Yes. Right. So I'm just, so I mean, it's refreshing to see that, despite everyone coming from different backgrounds, that there's obviously a little bit of time that is necessary. And it seems like the biggest thing is just being consistent and ultimately staying on the same page with your partner or whoever is going to share your life with you, even if it's just your children, but just being on the same and knowing what's important to you, and not working for money, but using tools so you can in your life, not letting your life be based upon how much money you have, but putting money aside so you can live your life how you want. That's something, we don't have any kids yet, praise him, which I think is the biggest thing that we have going for ourselves right now, is that we're just basically trying to take care of ourselves, and you know, he's going to be an actor, which is a very uncertain type of situation, and me wanting to be involved in nonprofit. It's just a lot of uncertainty, and I think it's just been a challenge trying to figure out a certain level of financial stability without freaking out about wanting to go to the movies, or, you know, just trying to enjoy life without, you know, I feel guilty every time I want to spend on
Yeah.
myself because we have debt, and I'm
Yeah.
just like, I want us to get to a place to where, you know, we can kind of figure it out. And I also, you know, recognizing my own personal worth, because, you know, I've had opportunities and I just feel like I'm worth more than that, but at the same time it's just like, you have to survive.
Right.
And I'm like, I want to make sure that I'm not selling myself short just because I have something in front of me, but I also don't want to miss out, you know, on an opportunity, because I don't want to feel like, oh, I'm too good for that, but I also don't want to put myself in a situation where if I would have held fast and kind of just bid my time, then I would have been able to kind of be in a better situation. So, I mean, it's definitely useful to see this information and see that it ultimately starts with a series to kind of figure out what to do, and just being flexible.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
And
I think, and that's something
yeah.
that millennials
Yeah.
have, and just a certain level of
And so what
in the
what I hear in your story is thank you again for sharing, because I think so many of us can relate to that stage of life. And actually, I'm seeing some thoughts that are generated by your comments, because clearly people are really getting it. And they've been there. They're there themselves. And so Matt Becker texted that there's a tool you can use called You Need a Budget, that will help you kind of walk through taking control of your income and expenses. So that's one thing that you could look at, is this tool called You Need a Budget. And then somebody else made a really good point too, which is that you know, it's using our networks to kind of tap into possible jobs that are both going to be leading us in a direction that we care about, but also paying. And so, for example, someone pointed out that AmeriCorps might have a great alumni job network that you might have already tapped into. Again, today's not to solve Ariel's challenges. It's really to just point out that there's this life cycle stage that we all go through at different points in time, and we have so been there, Ariel. So I want to thank you for sharing that reality, that real check that we've all been at. And I really also want to let you know that this is something we can talk some more about, because Ariel's going to be part of our millennial working group, where we're really actually trying to help millennials think about all these things over a course of calls in the 1 year. So thank you, Ariel. That was awesome. You can stick around if you want to. I'm going to talk a little about how we're going to wrap up this call. This has been fantastic. So we're running out of time. It has been a really important topic. I did want to get Lisa to just give a 1-minute thoughts about this idea about how she and her husband really did something very different for 10 years, where they both worked a 4-day work week, and how they made that affordable. And I have to give you the short story on that, Lisa, because I just think it's really important. And what did you do together to think about that and give each other the courage to make that happen? Because that's a really interesting financial story there too. And then Matt, I want to give you the last word. You got us started thinking about something that's so important. You've been listening to some stories, and I want to give you a chance to share the last word. But I will, in the meantime, put up some takeaways from today's call. So Lisa, the 1-minute story about how you guys made that work. Then we're going to hear from Matt. Then we'll wrap up the call.
A couple things. I think, you know, that was one of the most important sort of values for me, that I knew, having children, that I wanted it to be a very shared endeavor, that I didn't want to be the one, you know, to whom it would kind of all just fall to. So that's something we had talked about, and we were together for many years before we got married. I mean, before we had children. So, you know, we'd had a lot of opportunity to talk about it. In terms of it happening, you know, for me, I, you know, had said when I came back from maternity leave that I wanted to come back on a reduced schedule, and it was interesting. My husband, who's in high tech, one of the things he really had going for him is he was at a company that he had been a startup when he got there, and now was a much larger company. So he kind of knew, he had a lot of credibility and all that stuff. But he really approached it as, I'm going to do this. He didn't, like, I find it a little weird that it's like this asking permission thing in our workforce, and I think he felt, but again, he was coming from a position of, feeling comfortable to say, this is really important in my life, and, I want to do this, and I'm taking a 20% pay cut, and his manager was okay with it, but then he's been in various companies. I can't tell the whole story, but he did at one point have a manager when he was on a reduced schedule who said, oh, people in this room like us, we don't go on vacation. We just take our calls from somewhere else. This person was not supportive of this idea. And so anyway, I mean, that's kind of a whole different topic. But in terms of financially, I think part of it is fortunate that we were both in, corporate kind of jobs. So those are, better paying. And so, between us, I think we felt like we, had enough money, and we knew that, at that point, a lot of our money went to the few days of child care the kids were in. So, that's another reason why, like, that was a fixed expense, as was the house. And so, like, we were very cognizant of other things because, child care was something that you couldn't, there was no, that wasn't a variable we were going to change. So, so I think partially we were conscious, and I think partially we were fortunate to be in jobs that even at 80% for the two of us, we felt, comfortable.
Yeah, yeah. But I think what I really hear in your story, and again, there's so much more to say, but I will underscore this last point and then give the last words to Matt, is that what I hear is that Lisa and Brian, and Ariel heard this too, you got on the same page. You got clear about what your values were, what was important to you, and who you wanted to spend time with, and then you kind of worked backwards to figure out how to make that work. And that's something that really is an important takeaway from today's call. Thank you, everybody. We could all keep on talking and talking. I do need to actually move us on just to make sure that the recording isn't too long for others to listen to. But Matt, I wanted to give you the last word. This has been a really terrific conversation. I'm so glad I met you last year at Dad 2.0. Tell us your last thoughts for today.
Sure. No, this has been a lot of fun, and it's been great listening to Elaine and Lisa and Ariel and hear their perspective as well and their stories. It's been great. And I guess the last thought I'd have is just just kind of re-emphasizing this point, and it's been made so many times, of starting with what you want. And I liked what Lisa just said, I think, about her husband, just starting from, this is what I'm going to do, as opposed to asking permission. I think that's a very cool approach, again, starting from what you want, what's important to you, and going from there. And then the second thing I would say is just, it can feel like a lot, and it can feel like you have, a ton of ground to make up, or it's just, these things are too far off, they're not accomplishable, and I can understand that feeling very much, and I hear it all the time. And so, just focus on what you can do right now, even if it's small. And I think it was Elaine that was saying that it was always important for them to be saving, even if it was just a little bit. And I like that, because again, it's just, you control what you can control, you do what you can right now, and you just you keep trying to move forward. And instead of worrying about all the things you aren't doing or what feels like you're not doing, just keep focusing on trying to do at least one positive thing at a time, and keep making progress.
Wonderful. That's great advice, Matt. Thank you for a really outstanding Thursday webinar. I think this will be something that people will be able to come back to time and again and really learn from. Thanks, everybody. Wonderful job.
Thank you so much, Jess.